Hi there, podcast and public radio fans. Heath Drusen here, host and creator of the Extremely American podcast. I'm working on season 3, which is an urgent story about neo-Nazi terrorists and how they helped build a modern white supremacist movement, even from prison. Some of their ideas have even made it to today's White House. It's both a gripping true crime story and a timely warning about threats to our democracy. And this time, my investigative reporting is funded by you. To support the project, please make a tax-deductible contribution at extremelyamerican.org. That's extremelyamerican.org. And thanks.
More Idaho Matters now from the studios of Boise State Public Radio News. I'm Gemma Gaudet. For the last several years, the podcast Extremely American has taken listeners inside some of the country's most influential and less understood extremist movements. Host Heath Drusen has embedded with militia groups. He's traveled deep into the world of Christian nationalism and spent months building trust with people whose beliefs are reshaping American politics from the fringes all the way to the mainstream. The award-winning Boise State Public Radio and NPR podcast has been downloaded more than 1 million times, earning national recognition for its deeply reported on-the-ground journalism. In season 2 of Extremely American, the podcast focused on the Christian nationalist movement in the U.S., and one of the churches leading that movement is in Moscow, Idaho. It's called Christ Church. Heath and our own reporter, James Dawson, spent a year inside the Christian nationalist movement, and they talked with some of the movement's leaders, including this conversation about who should hold public office.
Hey, Gabe, how you doing?
Welcome. This is our...
I'm talking to Gabriel Wrench, a media personality and activist in Idaho. Most people call him Gabe.
Okay, great.
Gabe has a lot of ideas about how America should change. You said it would probably take a long time, but that you would like to see only Christians be able to run for office. So if you're Jewish, if you're Muslim, if you're atheist, certainly. If I had you right, you said that, yes, you would support eventually them not being allowed to run for office.
That's correct. I did say that.
Because Gabe is a proud Christian nationalist.
I think that the Christian faith is the ideal moral doctrine and principles for a thriving society. And the farther you get away from that, the more in chaos we descend. And so the only way to maintain that, or one of the ways to maintain that, is you have to have people who are running for office who believe that. Or you're going to get back into that chaotic decline.
So I'll tell you straight up, as a Jewish American, I hear that I can't run for office, other non-Christians can. And I have to admit, it's a little terrifying to me. Because to me, that means a fundamental freedom of mine in this theoretical world is gone.
Well, I mean, you're saying that in a country where you experience all these immense freedoms that was built on the Christian faith. So,
but where I can run for office right now.
Yeah, because your worldview is not good for society. And I mean, but you're unique in the sense that your problem is you just refuse to believe that Jesus is Messiah. Where it's like you get a lot right, but you get the key thing wrong.
That was an excerpt from season 2 of Extremely American. And now, as Drusen prepares the next season of Extremely American, he's turning his attention to another chapter in the story of extremism here in America, one that traces modern white supremacist movements back to a violent neo-Nazi network that emerged in the West decades ago. But before we get a preview of that new season, we wanted to ask Heath about a controversy that recently made headlines at the Pentagon. So Heath is coming back on the program live right now. Heath, welcome back. It's really nice to have you on the show.
Hey, Gemma, it's great to be back on the show. Long time no speak.
No kidding. Okay, so Heath, some folks may have heard a little bit about this most recent incident. It involved a revamped and really pretty drastically trimmed down list of religions that's now being recognized by the U.S. military. Refresh our memories on this, or for folks who haven't heard about this.
Yeah, for folks who haven't heard of this, what happened was the Pentagon used to have a list of approved religions, as in sort of recognized religions, and it was about 200 different religions. And that means basically troops who are out in the field, they have dog tags and it has a lot of their personal information on it, including what religion they have or lack thereof. So there was a huge list. America is obviously a huge, diverse country with a lot of different religions and plenty of people who, to varying degrees, believe and don't believe. Um, what the Pentagon did was they took that list of about 200 recognized religions and slashed it to just 31. So already that kind of raised some eyebrows. It was like, okay, wait a
Mm-hmm.
second, who's being left out? And some of it was kind of like trimming down some redundancy. There's no doubt about that. But there were a lot of categories that were taken out that people certainly wanted to be able to use. And there was a big one, especially for a state like Idaho, that really caught some people's attention. There were 22 different Christian sects,
Mm-hmm.
like we're talking, Catholicism, Jehovah's Witness. There are, all kinds of different evangelical sects, and they were all listed in the Christian category. So there was a Christian category in this original new list. And then the LDS Church, Latter-day Saints, also known as Mormons, they were listed as a separate religion altogether. They were not under the Christian category. Now, this came as a surprise to
Mm-hmm.
Mormons who consider
Mm-hmm.
themselves Christian. Jesus is, as they pointed out, in the name of the church, and so that raised a lot of eyebrows. It got a lot of response, and yeah, frankly, a lot of outrage.
So, Heath, I have to say, when I saw this list, and the thing that stood out to me, as you mentioned, was that the LDS Church, the Mormon faith, was taken off of this list. I believe about a quarter of Idahoans are LDS. I mean, much of Eastern Idaho is LDS. There was big reaction, would assume. Can you talk to us about that? Because a lot of people who also practice this faith are supporters of our current administration.
Right. I mean, there's certainly a lot of conservative LDS members. Utah, which has, the largest population of LDS members, obviously conservative state. Idaho, very conservative state. So there was a lot of outrage, and I think what really was notable about the outrage was a lot of it was coming from conservatives, including people who are supporters of Donald Trump. Um, Probably the most prominent in Idaho was Senator Mike Crapo, and he said he called the move quote confounding and unacceptable. Regardless of one's own religious philosophy, you'll find Latter-day Saints whose foundational beliefs are centered on Jesus Christ among the most patriotic individuals in our country, serving not only in the military but through various government departments around the world. So he asked for an immediate correction.
Mm-hmm.
Utah Senator John Curtis, who's also Mormon, called it unacceptable. And then the other Utah Senator Mike Lee, he had a kind of post a question on X, saying, "Can
Mm-hmm.
anyone tell me why the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints was left out of the list of Christian churches?" And I think that really that did catch the attention of the Pentagon because it wasn't like they were seeing liberal groups just be mad. There was outrage really across the political spectrum and among some real stalwart Trump supporters like
Mm-hmm.
Mike Crapo and Senator Mike Lee.
So, Heath, talk to us about how this is connected to some of the reporting that you actually did on Christian nationalism. for season two of the podcast Extremely American. Can you explain to us what a Department of Defense directive has to do with Christian nationalism?
Right. And a lot of folks would argue that it shouldn't have anything to do with Christian
Yeah.
nationalism, which is part of why people were so mad. Um, yeah. So when I saw this, I said Utah Senator Mike Lee was sort of like, can anyone tell me why this is happening? And I kind of wanted to be like, Senator, you confirmed Pete Hegseth as the defense secretary. You should know where this is coming from because I certainly knew exactly where it was coming from. Because Pete Hegseth, who runs the Department of Defense, the largest federal agency in the government, um, he is actually part of a church group called the Communion of Reformed Evangelical Churches, or CREC. Now, CREC is an organization that was founded by a guy who a lot of your listeners will recognize. His name is Doug Wilson. And
Hmm.
he's become one of the most prominent Christian nationalists in America. Doug Wilson is the pastor of Christ Church in Moscow, Idaho. And really, more importantly than that church in and of itself, he runs this nationwide communion of Reformed evangelical churches. So, he's got churches in almost every state. He runs a huge fundamentalist Christian education empire with hundreds of schools around the country. And if you've heard of Doug Wilson, you've probably heard about his views. He has extreme views on women who he thinks shouldn't be able to vote. He thinks America should be a theocracy. He's even whitewashed slavery slavery in America, basically praising the Confederacy and saying the antebellum South was actually a harmonious society, things like that. Um, Now, Doug Wilson is a Christian nationalist. He has said so himself. I've interviewed him for hours, actually, for season two of Extremely American. So I heard a lot from Doug Wilson.
Hmm.
And Pete Hegseth has said he admires Wilson. And Pete Hegseth was attending one of his churches in Tennessee before he became defense secretary. His kids attended a school that was part of Doug Wilson's national education program. And Pete Hegseth has also attended Doug Wilson's fairly new church in D.C. and had him deliver a sermon at the Pentagon. I'm saying all this to paint a picture because this Mormon snub, it seems directly out
Hmm.
of Doug Wilson's playbook because he told
Hmm.
me to my face that he does not consider Mormons Christians and actually calls them polytheists, meaning they worship many gods, which would come as a big surprise to any Mormon who certainly does not think of themselves in that way at all.
Oh, right. So it sounds to me, Heath, that there seems to be maybe a wider tension between the LDS Church and Christian nationalists. Is that a fair assessment?
I think yes. And I think Christian nationalists, I know Christian nationalists have always largely rejected the LDS Church because they told me that. I've interviewed a lot of Christian nationalists around the country, and they do not consider Mormons Christians. They actually consider them apostates because they think they're sort of
Mm.
posing as Christians and leading people astray. There's quite a bit of hatred, actually, really some unkind feelings there. Um, and I think what's growing now is that members of the LDS Church are starting to realize that these Christian nationalists do not consider them part of the fold. And I think some
Mm.
folks, some folks, frankly, might not have known that for a long time. And to be fair, you kind of had to be down these Christian nationalist rabbit holes like I go down for my reporting to really understand the level of distrust and sometimes hatred that a lot of fundamentalists have for Mormons. Now, there are where this is coming from. Part of it is there are major doctrinal differences. Doctrinal. I struggle with that word. There are differences in their belief systems between some mainline Christians and Mormons, and like any religion with a lot of different sects, there are arguments over that. But more fundamentalist Christians and especially Christian nationalists, they really see a lot of these differences as just an unbridgeable gap, and it's led to folks like Doug Wilson basically saying they don't see the LDS Church as sort of part of their vision for a explicitly Christian America, the theocracy that they'd like to create.
So, can we talk about the resolution to this controversy? Because it seems that it seems to say that the Christian nationalist connection, and how that is playing into all of this, and explain to us, how the Pentagon has, I guess, if we want to say, resolved this and what they did.
Right. So if you were reading closely, in some ways, the resolution of this controversy, and I'll put that in air quotes, a resolution in air quotes, kind of says as much about the Christian nationalist connection as the original list that came out, because they did back off in a way. The Pentagon pretty quickly reversed course and came up with a new list, except the way they changed it is really notable because they didn't add Mormons to the list of recognized Christian sects. What they did instead was took the whole Christian category out and listed everybody individually. So, you've got Baptist, Catholic, LDS. But there's no Christian category. And I found that really interesting because they responded to the outrage, for sure. They made a change, but they came short of saying, yes, Mormons say they're Christian, so we will put them in the Christian category. It seemed like that was a bridge too far, and they'd rather just have no Christian category at all. Now, a lot of the conservative critics of the original list did praise the Pentagon for the change. And I know, I believe it was Mike Lee said he had a phone call with President Trump and he was satisfied with it. But yeah, I thought it was very notable that they weren't added to the Christian list. And there wasn't really an apology either. It was like, we go, oh, yes, we heard from some folks and we made a change. So, and we really haven't heard from Pete Hegseth. Unless I missed something today, it was a Pentagon press release that was reversing course, but I haven't seen Pete Hegseth come out and say, I'm sorry, we respect our LDS service members, anything like that. So it doesn't really poke a hole in the theory that this is all connected to this Christian nationalist belief system.
We want to give you a sneak peek right now of season 3. So let's take a listen.
These people are extremely dangerous. Whether it's murder, robbery, or whatever, if the intent is to further their cause, then they feel they're walking in God's pathway.
40 years ago, a neo-Nazi terrorist cell set off on a mission to ignite a race war.
The fate of every last white man, woman, and child on this planet lies squarely on the shoulders of us. We cannot fail.
From their stronghold in Idaho, the order terrorized the western U.S. in the name of white supremacy.
Police have confirmed that longtime KOA radio talk show host Alan Berg was shot and killed tonight in downtown Denver.
Until it all ended in a fiery shootout with the FBI.
And then all of a sudden, out the window of the back window, he opens fire with a machine gun. And the bullets are slapping the tree next to me.
Their leader was killed. But out of the ashes of the order, hate has been making a comeback in America. Surviving members of the group have quietly helped build the modern white supremacist movement, even from federal prison.
Just remember what you're doing this for. In my case, like a lot of you out in the audience, we're doing this for the 14 words. What is the 14 words? We must secure the existence of our people and a future for white children.
So Heath, give us the big picture here. What story are you telling this time around?
So I am telling the story of the hunt for this neo-Nazi terror group, the Order, which in and of itself is a wild story. And I spent a lot of time with the FBI agent who really spearheaded the effort to take them down. But what really interests me about this story is that it does not end when the Order ends. There's this kind of fiery shootout and everybody goes to prison, and it seems like that's the end of the story. But there are all these connections I started finding between this group that really kind of, started in Idaho and Eastern Washington and became this just national menace. And a lot of connections I'm finding between them and today. And that's what really fascinates me about this story. Because really the surviving members basically were allowed to communicate with a lot of hate figures around the world and help build the modern white supremacist movement from federal prison. And I've talked to quite a few ex-neo-Nazis actually who have turned on the movement, and we're communicating with these guys. And it's pretty shocking to hear what they were able to do from behind prison walls after being involved with a murderous group. This group left a body count. They robbed banks. They were the real deal, actual domestic terrorists back in the day. And they really were able to kind of help rebuild the movement that they started. And, listeners will see when it comes out later this year, but there are connections I make all the way from the state level to DC, to really the highest levels of power where you see the influence of this terrorist group in pretty alarming places in mainstream politics.
Heath, for people who may not be familiar with this chapter of history, why is it important to understand it right now in what we're living through?
The big reason it's important is that history is repeating itself. And when I spoke to some old school ex-neo-Nazis who have sort of flipped on the movement now, they're like, a lot of the things we're seeing with the government officials talking about things like the Great Replacement and these other once fringe ideas, they're like, in my wildest dreams, I couldn't imagine us being so successful getting our ideas where we're hearing them. And some of these guys, they don't believe in the movement anymore. And they're like, yeah, man, I'm feeling PTSD hearing government officials repeat our talking points. So I think it's important, especially in this era where sometimes we become numb to some really outrageous things, to understand the foundation of some of this stuff and where it comes from. Literal neo-Nazis who were going around the country, killing people, robbing banks, with a huge hit list and plans to go on an assassination campaign and overthrow the U.S. government even. It's important to know where these are coming from, because I think sometimes we can become kind of numb to some of these ideas that are really dangerous.
Mm-hmm. I have just about 3 minutes left with you, Heath, and I really do want to touch on another aspect of your reporting, and that is the fact that you really truly go inside these movements. I mean, you gain access to people. We've seen this time and time again, and it takes a lot of time to do what you do. And with that, it also takes finances to do this. So talk to us about how folks can get involved and help to make sure that season 3 comes to fruition completely. and walk us through what folks can do.
Yeah, one of the things that sets this apart, this podcast apart, is that I do go there, and this is no exception. This season, I'm going to multiple states. I've even been to Switzerland to do an interview. It's a big journey because I want to take listeners with me for the ride. I don't want them just to hear a bunch of phone calls, and it's something that's immersive. And so this season we're doing something different. It's listener funded. So we're doing a crowdfunding campaign where listeners can help make this podcast and get it over the finish line, because I still have a ways to go, still have a lot of reporting to do to make this, the usual immersive, exciting, extremely American season that listeners are used to. So if you go to extremelyamerican.org, it's all one word, Extremely American, and then .org. You'll get to our fundraising page, and there's a whole bunch of information about the upcoming season and what we're doing, and you can make a tax-deductible donation there, and it really helps. Like, you can directly fund my reporting and be a part of it. So it's extremelyamerican.org, and it is tax deductible. It's in partnership with Boise State Public Radio, so it's all tax deductible, and it's real easy to donate on that site.
Well, and I have to say, it is so such critical reporting, and any amount, folks. I mean, to $1 to $1,000. It helps, and it will get this podcast funded. So we hope you donate. We've been speaking with creator and host of the award-winning podcast, Extremely American, Heath Drusen. And again, you can go to extremelyamerican.org, and you can make a financial contribution and truly be a part of this latest season. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Idaho Matters. And for quick news of the day, start your mornings with our podcast. It's called The Connector, Idaho Daily News. And you can also listen to Boise State Public Radio podcasts, including Idaho Matters, on YouTube.
Love Boise State Public Radio podcasts? They are free to enjoy, but not free to produce. If you can give, your support helps keep shows like Idaho Matters and Scandalize available to everyone. Donate now at boisestatepublicradio.org.